Hi and welcome, my name is Lawrence Baker and this video is going to be about Photoshop Workspaces. I'm currently in the Start workspace, and as of CC 2015 release, we've got the Start workspace. So when you open up Photoshop, it's on by default. Also, when you close any documents you have open, so you've got no documents showing, you also see the Start workspace. From my point of view, it's a great workspace and I don't think it's going away, but you can untick in Preferences the fact you see the Start workspace. It won't disappear, the Start workspace. You can just decide not to see it, basically. So how do I know I'm in the Start workspace? But there's a workspace picker here. On Windows it'll be a little bit higher, but it's here. And there are other default workspaces I can go to straight away, but I would normally open up an image from here or create a new document. So normally it will be in the Start workspace for me, and I probably wouldn't go anywhere else except from the Start workspace to somewhere else. You can also go to Window and Workspace and pick your workspaces. The only difference between those two pickers is keyboard shortcuts and menus. This is quite advanced, but I will cover it later. So, workspaces. The way to explain workspaces, the analogy I use is, it's as much about what you don't want to see on screen as you do want to see on screen. So let's say you're working in an office or a factory, your workspace should be tailored to the task you're doing. So that is a workspace. It's as much about what you don't want to see as what you do want to see. So if you were being really pedantic at work, let's say, you wouldn't have pictures of your children, food, anything else that you didn't want on your workspace. And funny enough, that's how I work in my office, so I am quite OCD about things like that. So workspaces for me are very important, but I've used Photoshop for years, so I use my workspaces in not a very sort of definitive way. I just know how to change my workspace quickly. So we're in the Start workspace. A little bit of explanation: recent files, iconic or list. Iconic's the best, obviously, because you have a visual reminder of what the document is. Libraries. If you don't know what a library is, and I'm assuming you don't because this video is aimed at beginners, if you know this stuff, don't watch it because it is aimed at beginners. Libraries are, let's say you create a document from scratch. You can save character styles, colors and layer styles, and even smart objects with your library. So that library will allow you to reuse those colors, layer styles and character styles, or smart objects in another image. So if you work in a team, it's very useful. And if you just want to remember what you did with an image, what colors you used, it's also very useful. So if I click on that library I've got there now, and it looks like I've actually duplicated two libraries there, but that's something I can just delete when I go to libraries. That's a library that saved my colors for that document, the character styles and the layer styles. You can also save smart objects as well. So libraries from my point of view are very useful, but I don't want to see them at the moment. So workspace picker, reset start. Reset is your Swiss Army knife for workspaces. It honestly is. As long as you remember reset, you can't go far wrong if you get lost in Photoshop. So presets are document templates. I can't call them templates because we need to be definitive about what we call things, and a preset is a preset, but it's a document template. And if you don't know what you're doing in Photoshop when you first start off, I recommend you use a preset. New is pretty obvious, and the reason, as I said, I like presets is if you don't know what resolution means or anything to do with color modes, etc., I would say use a preset if you're going to create a document from scratch and you don't know what you're doing. Open, so obvious, but of course I'm just going to show it to you. Also underneath, there's a couple of boxes here. You can search Adobe stock, which are stock images. Adobe have recently, or about in the past sort of 6 months, and we're in June 2016, bought out or purchased a stock image company. So they're trying to promote the product a lot. You can have a plan where you're allowed, let's say, 10 images a month free. Well, not free, you have to pay a subscription, or you can buy one-off images. I do use it. I find it quite useful. There's also 2 links to learning resources, show all, again, that Adobe stock image search box, and links to other learning resources. I believe it's tailored to the way you use Photoshop, but I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it is. So let's say you're very new to Photoshop, you might see something different to what I see. Back on that. Now, if you don't like the Start Workspace, you can come up to Photoshop Preferences, General. Under Options, untick Show Start Workspace when no documents are open. The when no documents are open needs a bit of explanation. I know it sounds quite obvious, but let's say I opened up that document there, and it's important we call them documents because Adobe don't call them images. They call them documents. So document is a definitive term, so you should use document when talking about workspaces. So let's say I want to close that down. Command or Control W, I'm back to the Start Workspace. No documents open, you're back to the Start Workspace. Whilst I'm here, I should probably go through Preferences to explain a few other things. So Photoshop Preferences, Workspace. Now this is the Workspace Preferences. The first 4 boxes are ticked by default. Now it's difficult to explain them without doing it visually, but Auto Collapse Iconic Panels means if you've got an iconic panel, it will disappear when you mouse away from it and come back as an iconic panel when you actually or mouse over it. Auto show hidden panels, the same thing really. If you've got a hidden panel, when you mouse over it or roll over it, you'll see the panel. The tooltips will help you here. They're on by default, so keep your tooltips on. Open documents as tabs. This is really important because by default it's ticked, and that means when you open a document, it's opened up in tabulated format. So if you don't like seeing that, untick it here. But I will say to you now, it's my preferred way of working because you can go to Window Arrange if you've got 2 documents open and actually have them vertically showing or horizontally aligned or whatever. And if you want to move assets between them, it becomes quite easy. Moving assets between tab documents is a bit problematic, and I will show it to you in a minute. Enable floating document window docking is a mouthful, and really it's quite difficult to explain, but if you're moving a lot of documents around, you can tab them inside other documents. It is quite difficult to explain without actually going over it, but it's quite advanced and I don't recommend you get into it. Large tabs means the tabs, the document tabs, will be slightly taller. My big complaint about Photoshop tabs, document tabs, is they're quite difficult to differentiate between sometimes. Although the active one is highlighted, it would be nice to have them in separate colors. Condense, that means enable narrow options bar. That's the tool options bar, but it's called the options bar, so let's be definitive. And if you click that, it'll make it very narrow and you'll have more screen real estate, but you'll lose that workspace picker on Mac system. I'm not too sure on a Windows system if you'll lose it, but on a Mac you will lose it. So if all goes wrong, you can restore default workspaces. So that's the workspaces that ship with Photoshop. So let's just cancel on that a sec. These are the default workspaces: Essentials, 3D, Graphic and Web, Motion, Painting and Photography. Design Space Preview, the preview's in brackets because they're experimenting with this design space. And unless you're a mobile app designer, please don't go down that route because it's even difficult to get out of. Reset Start is a Swiss Army knife. If things go wrong, just reset. New workspace, pretty obvious. You can create your own workspace. Delete workspace, you can delete a workspace. Even the ones that ship with Lightroom, as I said, you've got the preferences to go to restore your default workspaces. The only other little thing is file handling right down the bottom. Recent file list contains 20 files. Those are the 20 files you're seeing there. Also, they're the same 20 files you will see here. You can reset or clear the recent file list. I don't recommend you do that. Why should you? It's very useful to have this view. I really like it. I've actually just done an upgrade. It's June the 22nd, 2016 to 2015.5. So, you know, the Start Workspace has not gone away. I really like it. That's it, covered the Start Workspace. Let's open a document and get going. Now, this document is going to open up in the tab. There's the tab there. I need to have another document open. Open recent. Don't forget, I can't go back to the Start Workspace if I've got a document open. And just to prove that, Start Workspace is grayed out. So open, I'm going to pick another file. Open recent. I'm going to pick another file. So I have two tabs open. That's the active one. It's highlighted. That's the inactive one. So you can mouse between them. This reminder here is about libraries, and I keep it on by default because it's trying to remind me to save the colors and character styles from this document. It says new library from document. What it should say is new library from this document you're seeing on the screen. Notice it didn't come up for the photograph because I haven't done anything to that photograph. I'm not putting any text on it or played around with it with colors, etc. So for photographs it probably won't prompt you. For this type of thing it will always prompt you. I like it. You can click don't show again, but from my point of view I find it useful. Unfortunately I've created 3 different libraries from this document because I keep getting reminded and forget I've already created a library, but that's not a problem. You know, more is better. So let's cancel on that. Right, there's the 2 document tabs. I can go between them. Let's start at the top here because there's a little bit of an explanation if you're on a Mac. This is the application bar. It's got the name of the product there, which is Adobe Photoshop CC 2015.5. Now, it's not important if you're on a Windows system, but when I go to Window and untick application frame, notice what happens. I can see my desktop underneath and the other image as well. So if I mouse around, I can move these around. I'm actually seeing my desktop underneath. So it's really quite important that you understand the application frame if you're on a Mac, because when I first went from a PC to a Mac, I had this problem. Well, I call it a problem. I thought, why am I seeing the background? Why am I seeing other open, applications? It's because of the application frame. Window, application frame, options and tools. Don't untick that because you won't see your options bar or your tools panel. Let's click it. Right, we're back to the normal document tabs. And the application frame is here. So that's the best view to be in if you're on a Mac. So let's go from the left. This is the tools, plural, panel. Don't call it anything else. It's the tools panel. Because if you go to any of Adobe's learning resources or other videos or whatever, you need to be definitive. This is the tools panel. You'll notice in the bottom right hand corner there's a small right triangle. That indicates there's a grouping of tools, and it's a logical grouping based on the tool. So for instance, the brush tool will be grouped with the pencil tool. So that's a good example to use. Here's the brush tool. Now on some systems you mouse over, you'll see the other tools. For me, I have to click with the left mouse and press it down. I've got the brush tool, pencil tool, color replacement tool, and the mixer brush tool. Notice the keyboard shortcut for B is very important if you need to work quickly with the brush tool. So I'll go over keyboard shortcuts in a minute that are very important when you first use Photoshop. And these are the brush tools, as I said, pencil tool, etc., and logically grouped. You can also right click, but my preferred method is the left click. But the keyboard shortcut and B, for instance, so if I go Shift and B, you can turn this off in preferences as well. There's so many bells and whistles with Adobe products. You can cycle through those tools, Shift and the keyboard shortcut. Now you'll notice for each tool, the options bar, and this is what it is, the options bar changes. So these are the tools options, but Adobe call it the options bar. There's no other options bar inside of Photoshop. So if you call it the tools options bar, that's not a problem, but it's just the options bar. Going further down, also I will point out here, if you click on that double-headed arrow, you'll turn it into a double-docked tools panel. But personally, why would you do that? It's easier in one panel so you don't lose screen real estate. Coming down, that there will cycle through black and white because it's on the default colors at the moment, and I'm really going to get this into your head, hopefully, that remembering D for default colors is important. Let's say I go to another workspace. I'm going to pick Essentials, which is the normal workspace you come into. I'm going to reset it to make sure it's at the reset. Let's say I pick another color from here and go like that. That's changed to that other color. If I need to get back to the default colors, which are black and white, D on your keyboard is your friend. Also, there's X. X will swap the foreground and background around. Obviously, the black is the foreground because it's the one showing up in the foreground. X will swap them around. The other one is V for move. This is a very common keyboard shortcut and a very common tool you're going to use in Photoshop. So VD and X, don't forget VD and X. I have a way of remembering things, but I'm not going to go into that now. But VD and X will be your friends when you first use Photoshop, especially if you're playing around with masks, you're painting in black and white, etc. V, D and X. So D, default colors, X to swap them around. So even if you're working with other colors like brown here, I want to swap between brown and black, X on my keyboard will swap them around. Black is the foreground color, now it's brown, swapping around. That is the quick mask tool, and that's about masking. We're not going to go into that now. That is full screen mode. Down the bottom, you can also change the zoom settings. So if I type in 50 there, press return, I can do that. Not many people will do that, but you can do it. Also down here, if you click on the arrow, you can have different things showing. So let's say I have document dimensions showing. You can see the dimensions of my document there. Because in Lightroom, you'll see that as a view. And Photoshop is difficult to see sometimes, so having it down there is really great because they assume that you're a professional at Photoshop, you work in the industry, and you don't need to see that what they call stuff on the screen. So it's buried down there. So if I click on it, it also gives me other information. So that really is that side of the screen, really. Now we come over to the panels. Now that is a panel. If I drag it out, it's now a floating panel. It resides in a dock. That's the dock area there. So if I move that down there, it will appear down there. You'll normally notice a blue line if you want to add it to a group of panels. So I'm going to add it to that group of panels now. Notice that blue line as I moved it around. If I move it up there, you'll see the blue border. I should say, not line, blue border. If you move it right above, you'll see a thick blue line, which indicates you're going to put it by itself as just a panel by itself. So it's not a panel group, it's just a panel by itself. If I get hold of a group of them, let's go back and reset essentials again. If I want to get hold of color and swatches together, I don't click up there, I click alongside and drag. And where I see a blue line, I know I can put it in between. Now, the default workspaces are logical because you often create a lot of layers, so having your layers on the bottom and having layers, channels and paths together makes total sense. So these workspaces are quite sensible, but you can create your own, of course. So they reside in a dock. If I move it across the other dock there, you'll see what happened. It will reside there. Well, it doesn't quite work like that because if I move it there, I might see the thick blue line. I'm adding it in libraries, but sometimes adding it below doesn't quite work how you think it's going to work. But that's fine at the moment. So don't be frightened of moving stuff around. The big thing to remember is, though, if you can't see something, it will be under Window and you have to pick it here. Now, what's ticked is actually visually showing. It doesn't mean it's an icon like this. It means, for instance, well, my libraries are showing, so I know my libraries are ticked. It's showing. Adjustments is showing, so it's ticked. So it doesn't mean it's not there already in iconic view. Now, that is iconic view. I can drag it out and see the names if I want. I can also tooltip over and see what it means as well. But if I click on the double-headed arrow, I will expand the panel. If I click again, I will make it into an iconic view. I can also bring it in and lose the names if I wanted to. Also, if I want to dock that by itself, for instance, I can move it there, thick blue line. I've got a whole new dock, collapsed. I can make it expanded by going like that. So you get the idea, guys. Don't be frightened of moving stuff around. And really importantly, be aware that if anything's not showing, it's here. It's as simple as that, really. Don't be frightened of dragging stuff around. Do what you like, because you can always go back and go reset and you're back to normal. The Swiss Army knife again is Photoshop Preferences, Workspace, Restore Default Workspaces, go OK, and go OK. If I now go Essentials, Reset Essentials, it hasn't changed because I haven't really changed the workspace. Now, if you wanted to create your own workspace, let's say I drag color out here. It's now a floating panel. If I liked it being there and I wanted that in my workspace every day, I could go here and go New Workspace and call it Test 1 whatever. Now notice it can also capture keyboard shortcuts, menus and the toolbar, because you can have custom keyboard shortcuts, custom menus and a custom toolbar. And it's really important if you work in the industry, and I mean if you work every day in Photoshop, that you might use these workspaces. The old analogy, as I just said, was if you don't want to see things, you can get rid of them. You just have the tool showing you actually need to carry out a task. So people who use Photoshop every day will probably do this. For most of us, even photographers, we probably wouldn't do this. So if I created test one now, that would be fine. Let's say I want to create another workspace with that out there. I could come up here and go Window, Workspace, New Workspace. But I will point out here now, this is where the keyboard shortcuts and menus is different from the other pull down there. I can save my application menus and do all sorts of things and save it just for that workspace. It's very advanced and not for most of us, but you can do that. So that's another thing you can do. So I'm not going to create another workspace because it's very straightforward. So just a heads up, because I don't think there's really a lot to say anymore really about panels. So panels, as I say, I can make that back into a panel group. Blue border indicates I'm going to stick it with that other panel. That's a panel group. These are docks. That's a floating panel. It's really as simple as that. The other thing I need to mention, actually, that double-headed arrow will collapse it to an icon. I can now drag it over there and put it back with that, or put it in its own group there if I wanted to. Try and drag it back there, drag it underneath. The blue line, or the thick blue line, indicates you're going to drag it underneath or above. When you've got a blue border, you're going to create a group basically. The other thing to mention, and I'm going to press F5, which is the keyboard shortcut, but if I went to Window and Brush, it's got a keyboard shortcut of F5. I never forget that keyboard shortcut because I use brushes a lot. F5, you can see that it's now appeared from that iconic panel or iconic dot there. If you look under the panel menu, which is that hamburger icon, which we like to call it in the web design business, that is the panel menu. It's very important for certain panels. So if you're in the brush presets here and you don't like the brushes you're seeing, you come to the panel menu. You can go out to the menu itself, but I recommend you work like this. You can reset the brushes, load new brushes, pick another set of brushes. So drop set of brushes. It says, do I want to append it to the current brushes I have open? I don't. So I go, okay, I've got new brushes. And these are the shadow brushes. So when you're working with the brush panel, this is really important. It is available elsewhere, but I would say to you that that panel menu can be very important. There's another quick heads up here I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to Essentials and go Reset Essentials. Because don't forget, if you've done something to a workspace and you've not saved it and you open up Photoshop again, it will come back to that workspace with the panels as they were. So if you're in trouble, again, reset. So reset. Now I've got my color swatch, my color panel, I should say, showing up L, A and B. That's lightness A and B channel. Now, or some people call it lab, but that's what it's called. Now, that's not the normal way you see it. You normally see it in R, G and B by default. So if you don't play around with that, it's R, G and B. The reason I changed it is here I went to the panel menu and I picked lab slider. Now, if I pick grayscale slider and go Essentials Reset, it doesn't change the fact I'm viewing that in that view. Just be aware that the panel menu is there. Right. Document tabs need a little bit of a mention. I'm going to turn that view back to 100. I'm going to use the workspace to do it. I'm not going to use any tools like zoom, etc. Back to 100% view. Now, if I wanted to move this logo, let's say, into another document, the other document tab I got open, the way you do it is this, and a lot of people get it wrong, and I used to get it wrong when I first came to CC, and I couldn't work out why I couldn't move things. So move tool, which is V, so V, D and X are your friends, V for move tool, V, drag it up to the tab you want to move it into. When you see the image, drag back down and then let go of the mouse. Control Z. That's only taking me back one step. You cannot go back any further in Photoshop, so you have to go to Edit and step backwards. Control Z or Command Z or Control Z or Command Z will only take you back one step. So to show it to you again, so we get this really in our heads, make sure that asset is highlighted or layer, whatever. Drag up to the tab you want to move it into. See the image, drag it back down, and wherever you drag it back down to, it will appear. Now, Command Z again, that should take me back to where I was. If you're not comfortable with doing that, Window, Arrange, and let's say 2 up horizontal or 2 up vertical. You can have 6 images. Notice consolidate all to tabs, that are bringing back to tabs, but 2 up horizontal, let's say. That will do me. Click on that, move it. It's as simple as just going like that. So if you have trouble, finger trouble, and you don't like tabs, for instance, and you want to quickly get away from tabs, you've got more than one document open. If you've got only one document open, a tab's not a problem. 2 documents open or more, up to 6, you can have a view with those 6 images showing like that, depending on how you want to see it. That's it for Workspaces, guys. Workspaces are fundamental to how you work in Photoshop. Just a quick heads up, Tools panel, Options bar. These are panels, you can drag them about. That's a floating panel. That now goes to a panel group. See the blue border. That's an iconic panel. You can make it larger by going like that. Click on the double-headed arrow. There are panel menus, which you can change. If you don't like something where it is, you can drag it somewhere else and even create a new dock there, iconic dock. Make it larger by clicking on it. Use the double-headed arrows if you wanted to. You get the idea, guys. You can move stuff around. I can move past up to libraries there. Move it above, thick blue line or horizontal line. Move it there. It'll make another dock with just that panel in it. So don't be frightened of moving stuff around. Swiss Army knife, reset, and also it's up under Window there. As I said, you can save keyboard shortcuts and menus native or unique to each workspace. That's it with Workspaces. I've just started going into Photoshop and I hope I haven't called it Lightroom because most of my videos have been about Lightroom. My love is Photoshop. It's my first love. I love Lightroom. It's very simple to use when you get used to it. Adobe Camera Raw is fantastic. You still have Adobe Camera Raw via Adobe Bridge, and I will explain that in another video. So you can still use Adobe Camera Raw. But basically, my next video is going to be about layers. Because once you understand Workspaces and understand layers, then you can just find tutorials that show you how to do certain things, fun things, let's say smoothing skin or whatever. And then you start using the tools. But once you understand layers and you start playing around with the tools, you're well on your way to understanding Photoshop. That's it, guys. Thanks very much.